Hi, my name is Dell McGinley Simeone, and I live in Westfield, New Jersey. And my father's grandparents, two sets of grandparents, both came during the famine time. I'd like to start with his father's family. My great-grandfather, who was Owen Vincent McGinley, married Ellen Gallagher. They came from, at least Owen did, came from Parish Doe, County Donegal, which I think is where Doe Castle is. And Doe Castle, I think, was the stronghold of the McSweeneys. Anyway, all that area now has been incorporated into Creaslough. When they came, I don't know what ship they came on, or if they left from Belfast, I don't know. But they did come to Bristol, Pennsylvania, and it was my grandfather and his great-grandfather and his brother, whose name I think was Manus, and they moved to Bristol, Pennsylvania, and apparently there were a lot of McGinleys in Bristol. And they had work on the railroad, which at the time was the Erie-Lackawanna. My great-grandfather then moved up to, it's north of Bristol, to northeastern Pennsylvania, to Mock Chunk, which is now called Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. And there were a lot of Donegal people there. And apparently, like a lot of the women did not speak English. And the men did because they went to work, and I guess they learned quicker because they had to work. Anyway, my great-grandfather was had an accident on the railroad and was killed just a few months before my grandfather was born. And I think there was a sister and another brother of his that were born already born. And so then he married my grandmother, and they had 10 children. And my father was the youngest, and I'm the youngest grandchild. Most of all my cousins grew up in Pennsylvania, except me, grew up here in New Jersey. And they all went on to college, and they all had families that spread all over the United States. All right, now I want to go to my grandmother's side, which is my father's mother's side. They came from Sligo, and it was around famine time. His name was Patrick Conroy, and her name was Anna O'Donnell. And what's interesting is that both of her parents were O'Donnells, and supposedly, and Patrick's mother was a Gilligan, and I don't know whether it was Helen or Sarah Gilligan. That's as much as I know. But anyway, they emigrated and went to Canada. Whether they went to Nova Scotia or they went to, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Grosse Ile in the middle of the St. Lawrence, which I know ships went there too, as well as Nova Scotia. I don't know, but Patrick later worked on the Erie Canal. It was that second phase of the Erie Canal, because it was built in two phases, one I think in the 1820s and then later on, and probably a lot of Irish immigrants worked on the Erie Canal. I think he drove mules that pulled barges. And my father's mother was born up around Troy, New York. And she had 7 siblings, I believe. Anyway, they made their way to Pennsylvania, and Patrick, his wife died, and one of the girls had to raise all the other children. There were 2 boys, and the rest were girls. And they lived in Mock Chunk also. The O'Donnells, which my great-grandmother came from, supposedly had an estate in Sligo, and there were a lot of, maybe there were 10 or 11 O'Donnell estates. How large? I don't know. Whether it was 2 acres or 40 acres or 100 acres, who knows? But they didn't have that kind of life when they moved here. And the O'Donnells cut off Anna O'Donnell when she married Patrick Conroy, or wanted to marry Patrick Conroy, because he didn't come from the same class as she did. And that family also, they mostly stayed in Pennsylvania, but they her cousins, were my father's cousins, lived, Texas, all over the United States too. And that's about the basics.